During the spec mania of 2020 through 2021, dozens of electric vehicle startups went public. By now, the vast majority of them have already gone bankrupt and cease operations. One exception to this is VinFast, a global electric vehicle manufacturer headquartered in Vietnam. VinFast listed its shares on the Nasdaq in 2023 after merging with the SPAC. In the first few days of trading, the share price surged to 82, giving the company a market capitalization of almost $200 billion. On paper, this made the company more valuable than both Ford and General Motors combined. But the astronomical valuation was little more than mirrors. Approximately 84% of VinFast shares are owned by its parent company, the Vin Group. Another 14% are owned by the Vin Group's founder and chairman. So less than 2% of the shares were made available to the general public. When there is a very small free flow of shares available, the stock price can move erratically. Imagine hypothetically that you own a house. You convince one person to pay you $100 in exchange for a 0.0001% stake in the house. Technically, your houses were $1 billion. But this is meaningless because nobody would pay you $1 billion for the whole house. Similarly, VinFast was technically worth more than 40 GM. But this was just based on a few momentum traders pumping up the share price under conditions of extremely limited supply. Nobody seriously believed that the company was worth $200 billion. The reason VinFast has been able to survive while many of its peers have failed is because of the backing it receives from its parent company, the Vin Group. The Vin Group is a massive conglomerate in Vietnam. Its founder, Mr. Pham, is the richest man in Vietnam with a net worth of $6.5 billion. The Vin Group's primary business is real estate. They developed residential buildings, hotels, and shopping centers throughout Vietnam. In 2017, the Vin Group created a new subsidiary called VinFast, which would be the first fully fledged domestic automobile manufacturer in the country. While they started off making gasoline-powered cars in 2022, they transitioned to making only EVs. They also make electric scooters and buses. The company has grown rapidly. In 2020-4, they sold 97,000 EVs globally. But they incurred a gross loss of approximately $10,000 for each car they sold. In 2020-4, the company posted an operating loss of $1 billion. To date, VinFast has been almost completely reliant on the deep pockets of its parent company and its billionaire founder. Despite the extreme operating losses, VinFast is powering ahead with ambitious expansion plans. They plan to increase their manufacturing capacity in new EV models all over the world. In this video, we'll analyze VinFast operational performance and whether the company has any chance of long-term viability. Foreign automakers including Toyota and Ford have produced cars in Vietnam for many years under joint ventures. But before VinFast, there is never a domestic automobile brand. The founding of VinFast was a very ambitious project indeed. It required significant expertise and infrastructure that did not yet exist in the country. They hired an Italian company, Pininfarina, to design their cars, and they partnered with the Austrian contract manufacturer Magna Steyr to set up their factory in Vietnam. They purchased state-of-the-art industrial robots and other equipment to make a modern factory with a high degree of automation. The first EV they released was a VF V34, a subcompact crossover which began deliveries in Vietnam in December of 2021 and is also sold in Indonesia. In September of 2022, they launched the VF8, which is slightly larger. It is sold in Vietnam, North America, Europe, and the Middle East. In March of 2023, they launched a full-size SUV called the VF9. It is sold in Vietnam and North America. In April 2023, they launched a subcompact VF5. This is even smaller than the E34. It is sold in Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. In December of 2023, they launched the VF6. It's basically a slightly bigger version of the VF5. It is sold in Vietnam, the Philippines, and Europe. In March of 2024, they launched the VF7, which is slightly bigger still. It is sold in Vietnam and the Philippines. Finally, in July of 2024, they launched the VF3. This two-door mini crossover is the smallest car they've ever made. It is sold in Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. In addition to EVs, VinFast makes electric scooters. Electric scooters are very popular across Southeast Asia. They provide an affordable way to travel, especially in dense urban environments. Finally, they also make electric buses, but at least for now, they're in extremely small quantities. VinFast wants to become a globally relevant EV brand. They set up showrooms in the US, Canada, and Europe. They're even planning to build a factory in North Carolina to qualify for the American EV tax credit. But today their international results have been disappointing. In 2020, for the company generated the equivalent of $7 billion of total revenue. $1.4 billion, or about 85%, came from Vietnam. $180 million, or about 11%, came the US and Canada. An immaterial amount came from Europe. $71 million, or 4%, came from Indonesia and the Philippines. First, we'll look at why VinFast failed to gain traction in North America. We'll then look at how they're doing in their home region of Southeast Asia. The VinFast VF8 launched in Vietnam in late 2022. It started selling in the US and Canada in 2023. It quickly garnered very poor reviews, with some critics calling it the worst car in America. Complaints include poor suspension, which gives it a bumpy ride, glitchy software, glitchy HVAC, inefficient battery, laggy accelerator, and poorly designed driver assist features. The poor reviews caused sales to disappoint. In 2023, VinFast generated $28 million of revenue in North America. The VF8 cost about $50,000, so that's approximately 600 cars. As a newcomer to the automobile industry, it's perhaps unsurprising that there are issues with the software and user experience. And to be fair, almost egregious issues have been solved by over-the-air software updates. In 2023, they launched a VF9 in Vietnam. It began deliveries in the US in November of 2024. This is a full-size SUV with 7 seats. The VF8 only has 5 seats. In 2020-4, VinFast generated approximately $180 million of revenue in North America. The VF8 cost about $50,000, while the VF9 cost about $70,000. The vast majority of the sales were likely VF8 because the VF9 came out near the end of the year. So they probably sold approximately 500 cars in North America in 2024. Well, that's a big increase from the prior year. It's still pretty minuscule in the grand scheme of things. Even if they can fix all their software issues, VinFast is facing an uphill battle in North America, where the EV market is extremely competitive. Currently, the VinFast VF8 starts at $47,000 and has an all-electric range of 235 miles. Because it is manufactured in Vietnam, it is not eligible for the $7,500 EV tax credit. The Model Y cost $49,000. It's about the same size of the VF8, has 327 miles of range, and is eligible for the EV tax credit. Or you can get the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which starts at $36,500 and has 260 miles of range. This is more than $10,000 cheaper than the VF8 and has slightly more range. The 7C VF9 starts at $70,000 and has 300 miles of range. If you want a 7-seat electric SUV, you're probably better off buying the Kia EV9. Light long-range rear-wheel drive version has 300 miles of range. This is slightly less than the VF9, but it also costs $10,000 less. Given VinFast well-documented software and quality control issues, there's really no reason to roll a dice on one while there's so many better options available from established brands. Now let's look at VinFast operations in Southeast Asia. This is where the majority of their revenue comes from. In 2020-4, 85% of their revenue came from Vietnam and another 4% came from Indonesia and the Philippines. The automobile market in Southeast Asia is very different from North America. These are developing countries, so people prefer smaller cars that are more affordable. Many cities in Southeast Asia are very crowded. Smaller cars are easier to drive in congested traffic conditions. In North America, VinFast Trices held a larger VF8 and VF9s. In Southeast Asia, their best-selling cars are the VF5 and VF3, which are much smaller. The tiny VF3 sells for the equivalent of approximately $13,000. From the perspective of a Westerner, being able to buy an EV of any kind for $13,000 sounds amazing. But in Southeast Asia, this is nothing special. There are many tiny Chinese-made EVs available across Southeast Asia and the $10,000 to $15,000 range. So while the VF3 is not the cheapest option on the market, it is certainly competitive within its market segments. One advantage of the VF3 is its simplicity. Because the software and other features are so simple, they are not nearly as glitchy as a more complicated software in the VF8 and VF9. While VinFast is trying to expand across Southeast Asia, the vast majority of their sales still come from the domestic Vietnamese market. Within Vietnam, VinFast can take full advantage of its relationship with its deep-pocketed parent company, the Vin Group. In addition to direct financial backing, the Vin Group also provides other advantages. The Vin Group, another subsidiary called Green and Smart Mobility, or GSM. GSM is a taxi company that exclusively uses EVs. One of the reasons they created GSM was to purchase cars from VinFast. In 2023, GSM purchased 25,000 EVs from VinFast, representing 72% of VinFast total deliveries. In 2020-4, they purchased 27,000 EVs, representing 28% of total deliveries. GSM has plans to continue growing within Vietnam and even expand to neighboring. VinFast is currently operating at a loss, but this is to be expected for a rapidly growing company. They only started producing EVs in 2022. In 2020-4, they sold almost 100,000 units. This is a very impressive rate of growth, and the unit economics are improving. In 2023, their average selling price was $26,000 per car, and they recognized a gross loss of $15,000 per car. 4, their average selling price declined to $15,600. That's because they launched the cheaper VF5 and VF3, which now represent the majority of their sales. Their gross loss narrowed to $10,000 per car. In theory, it could be cheaper to make EVs in Vietnam instead of China, as Vietnam has lower labor costs, but cheap labor is only one aspect. You need the workers to be trained with their relevant skills. You need to have the infrastructure in place, and you need very high volumes to realize economies of scale. In theory, this should all be possible for VinFast to achieve. But this will take many years, and the company is losing billions of dollars in the meantime. The Vin Group has a lot of money, but not an unlimited amount. Will they be able to prop up VinFast long enough to reach profitability? We'll just have to wait and see. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about VinFast? Let us know in the comment section below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial signing out.